Hello, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Software Plaza podcast. I'm Twain Taylor, editor at Software Plaza. And if you like what you hear on this conversation, go and check out all the other conversations we've had. We've been doing this a while now. Got a lot of conversations up on Spotify, YouTube, or our website, softwareplaza.com. And we talk on just all things cloud native, Kubernetes. And these days, I think in the past few months, a lot of conversations have been around just what does it mean to enable agentic AI in the enterprise. That's been kind of the focus. We've had a lot of startups in the space come on and talk about the approach they're taking to solve those kind of agentic AI challenges that organizations face. And today as well, we'll be talking on this very topic that is agentic AI, enabling it, governing it. And I'll be talking today to Dylan Etkin, who's the CEO and co-founder at Sleuth. That's Sleuth, Sleuth. So go and check them out at Sleuth. It's a .io, sleuth.io.
Hello, everybody.
Yeah.
I'm glad to be here. Thanks.
All right, yeah. And wanted to just read the tagline of Sleuth on their homepage. It says, define your, uh, keep scrolling, but a bunch of things. Define your agent skills once, distribute everywhere. Define your agents.md once, distribute everywhere. Define your rules once, or your hooks once, distribute everywhere. And explaining that, it goes on to say, AI agents are only as good as what they know and what they're allowed to do. Sleuth Skills gives your organization a single control plane to manage, distribute, and govern every agent skill, rule, and MCP server. All right, so uh, yeah, that's quite some interesting terms in there that we're going to dig into. But before we get into uh, the the details. Let's first ask Dylan. Dylan, here, tell us about yourself, Dylan. What's your background? What led you to co-found Sleuth?
Yeah, absolutely. Getting older every day. So I have been in the industry, oh gosh, almost 30 years now. It's kind of ridiculous. For myself, I started as like a developer, and really that's probably where my heart lives is like as a product builder and engineer. Yeah, and so a little bit about my background. I was around in the dot-com boom, and I was lucky enough to work at an e-commerce company that was using Java when it was hip and cool. We were using JSP 0.92. It wasn't even a 1.0 spec. Really, I got very fortunate that I joined Atlassian as employee number 20 when it was like a tiny little startup
Wow.
in Sydney. And what a privilege to be a part of like a rocket ship, and just the opportunities that come from being a part of a company that has a lot of product market fit and growth. And so while I
Mhm.
was there, I was on the Jira team. I was on like one of the first three people on the Jira team. Did that for
Mhm.
about 5 years. I was the Jira architect. Like when we implemented the first architect, I built JQL and like the JQL autocomplete and that stuff while there.
Mhm.
Moved to the US, stayed with Atlassian. They had bought Bitbucket and they needed somebody to lead that team and that software. And so I took that on and took Bitbucket from about 40,000 users during acquisition to about 2 million when eventually I moved on to something else. Funny enough,
Mhm.
I wanted to go back into like small and startup-y when I left Atlassian because I joined at 20 and it was about 1,200 when I left, and ended up at a small startup called Status Page. And for those in the know, about a year later, Atlassian bought Status Page. So as much as I tried to leave the mothership, they wouldn't let me. That was a great experience too because I got to use my knowledge of the organization to sort of bring that thing in house.
Mhm.
Yeah, then there was a little seed of something that started for me in the Bitbucket days where I was like, there's a lot going on with deployments. I wanted as an engineering manager and leader to understand more about how well were we shipping, where were the bottlenecks around that, just looking at a list of pull requests is achievable when you have a team of like three or four, but when you have a team of 20 or 40, all of a sudden, like you need something else to give you a sense of like how well are we doing. And that really had crystallized into this idea of Sleuth, and a few years after that acquisition at Atlassian, I decided it was time to just make that into a reality, and yeah, decided to take the jump and start the company. And had a couple of folks that I'd known for about 20 years joined as co-founders, and off we went. And now we're 6.5 years later.
Amazing story there. Do you still use Jira? Do you still like Jira and just what's where it's at right now?
Well, in my company, we're using Linear, so I guess that just
Oh, that's
speaks
cool.
volumes.
Yeah.
I still have a real fondness for Jira. I think what I think I can say with confidence is that if I had a team of 500, there probably is nothing else we would use. So Jira would be the answer. I do think it's still kind of when you get to a certain amount of scale, it's probably the
Yeah.
answer for you. I know
Mm,
Linear is trying really hard to make that not true. Um,
mm.
but yeah, so
Yeah, yeah, interesting.
fond of
Yeah.
Jira, but
Oh,
it's
mm,
become a little unwieldy.
all right, all right. Yeah, yeah. Yeah. So when I was reading out the tagline of Sleuth, there was a bunch of different terms there, agent skills and MCP, Claude, MD, yeah, a bunch of things, and very AI focused. But before this, the AI wave, what was Sleuth's focus? Tell us a bit about that and just your journey from there to where you're at today.
Yeah. So initially, I mean, actually going into the way, way, way back machine, we started doing a thing that we called deployment tracking. And the thesis there was that like, we were all doing like daily deploys and that sort of thing. And that, we weren't giving that part of the process enough attention. And
Mm-hmm.
I don't think, I mean, having learned a startup lesson, like there's a reason why we all were trying to ignore deployments and that data, because a good deploy is one that you don't have to care about. But having made that, we had built something that was really good at understanding the moment that of transition between like development and deployment. And there's the Dora metrics that was sort of brought out by Dora, like outside of Google, and then Google bought Dora, and they have the state of DevOps reports. And we kind of just realized that we had built a really great Dora tracker. So we could surface like your frequency, mean time to recovery, failure rate, and change lead time. And so, yeah, we spent a number of years building out a tool that did that. Had a number of great customers, like Puma, Red Bull, and Atlassian, and those sorts of folks using the tool. Um, but yeah, I mean, I think over time that became somewhat table stakes. And Dora, I've always said Dora is great at telling you how am I doing trying to ship the things that I'm trying to do. It's useless when it comes to am I shipping the right thing, you know?
Okay, okay.
Um, but yeah,
Yeah,
so I
yeah.
mean, there are still a bunch of folks that are doing that. We still have a tool that is out in the market for that. But like you say, AI just kind of showed up, and we could see the writing on the wall and understand that like we're about to go through a revolution. And the company that we would built was pre AI, and assumed a certain set of workflows that we had evolved in DevOps, over the last like 10, 15 years, and we could just see that that was changing, right? Changing like very, very quickly. And so,
Mm.
for ourselves, we gave ourselves some time and some freedom to understand like what would that mean for a product? Like how can we be relevant in this new world as well as in the old?
Yeah, a really interesting question there to solve for. Am I shipping the right thing? And likely we'll be digging into that in our conversation to see how we could actually do that. Um, yeah, and yeah, but before we get into that, I want to ask. With selling it, it's something to sell a deployment tracker, a Dora metric tracker that people are familiar with. They already are deploying stuff, and there's just more familiarity and there's more context around it. But then when you're talking about, agent skills and your rules for agentic AI, it's still very new, and people are still coming to terms with just how this whole thing works and how we can actually use this. And it's still early along in the journey. What have you seen in terms of the kind of response you've been getting to, uh, this shift that you made? Where do you see the market at when you talk to prospects about this? Do you see more confusion and lack of clarity still, or do you see clarity developing really quick and that the market is actually moving faster than you think? What do you see out there?
Yeah, I mean that's a great question, and I mean just to frame it a little more, I mean, Anthropic released agent skills as skills back in October, right? So what is that, 6 months ago? I mean, it feels like it was, maybe that's dog years or something because it does feel like a long time, and certainly the industry has grabbed it a lot. I think, and it's made
Mm-hmm.
a very outsized impact. And similarly, I'm pretty sure it's about this time last year that MCP was released, and all of a sudden it's a standard, and you just see like a whole ecosystem around that. So they are very new, but they all have such an impact that they really have made quite a difference. We
Mm-hmm.
talk to a lot of organizations and a lot of people just trying to understand, where they are at in that maturity cycle. And I think
Mm-hmm.
you're right that a lot of organizations, they maybe don't even understand the power of agent skills or MCP. We've kind of noticed that there's almost like three phases of adoption. There's organizations that are just in spaghetti mode where they're like, we're going to just throw some money at this and hope, like, we're going to tell everybody, just do whatever, and the hope is that somebody in the organization will figure something out and, raise their hand and say, hey, I think this is working. But it's very chaotic. There's no real plan to it other than I don't want to get left behind. We have to invest something in this. And then there's kind of like the phase two where you have had a few people that have like figured some stuff out. And I see that as like almost, somewhere between 2 and 5% of the population inside of an organization
Mm-hmm.
have become these 10Xers that really understand how to use the tools. But unfortunately, like the other 95% are still 1Xers. And, they have them and they're sort of like, well, occasionally I open it, but they are not power users. They haven't realized the gains and the benefits.
Yeah.
And in that phase two, there's like maybe they're starting to think about standardization, like, where they had, Cursor and Codex and Gemini and Kiro
Mm-hmm.
and Claude Code and whatever. Now they're like, okay, we're going to pick two. We're going to pick Cursor and Claude Code, and maybe we'll have some organizational contracts with them and whatever. And then phase three is more of like okay, we've gotten serious about this. Now we're going to like, how do we make the AI better? Right? Like we're going to use some agent skills. We're going to use some MCPs. We're going to be smart about locking down our MCPs. Like we want to understand our token usage to a certain degree. Maybe I mean, I don't know if this is phase four or phase three, but like also then like once an organization is really leaning in, all of a sudden they're trying to solve this problem of autonomous agents. Like in Slack, I want to say fix JRA 123, and I have a pull request that's open for that. So there's a spectrum. And
Mm-hmm.
to bring it back to your original question, the phase one and phase two folks, when you start to tell them, hey, you're going to manage and govern your AI assets, like meaning like your skills and your MCPs, they're a little bit like, what?
Mm-hmm.
Like, and they want to get there, but they're also, yeah, it's almost like you're saying, here's some great charging infrastructure for your electric car. And they're like, I've got a horse and buggy. What would I need charging infrastructure for?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I'd imagine it's kind of like the funnel where, the level one has most of the folk in there, and then it just gets fewer and fewer. Like you mentioned, you said 5% are the 10Xers, and it probably gets fewer and fewer the more you go up that maturity level. Um, where do you see your ideal prospects? At which rung of these? You mentioned these four levels. Where do you see your ideal prospects?
I mean, certainly it's a much easier sell to folks in like the phase three, right? So it's weird, it really is with AI. Like there's some sort of like magic chasm that people have to get themselves over themselves, you know?
Mhm.
But once an organization kind of has gotten it en masse, I think like the real trick is are you still writing syntax or are you not? You know what I mean? Like the folks that seem to not get it and be at the 1x level or whatever, they're like, oh, I use it to ask a question. Or yeah, I used it to make this one function, but I didn't like it and whatever. And like the 10xers are like, syntax is for robots, man. I don't do that anymore. Like,
Mm.
and yeah, I mean, they're still doing quality control. They're still like looking at the diff, but they're also then using like agent skills to be like, this is how we do service layers in our organization. This is how you work with this DSL. This is how like the code should be structured. Like it's giving it this set of instructions that's saying, I have now turned you into a good developer in our organization. So you can have something, the output is quality versus, being a little more crap. But then I think that unlocks that sort of no more syntax generating. And then yeah, like so if an organization, if you're speaking to somebody like I don't even know, like Airtable or something like that, right? Where they're claiming that 80% of their developers are using this thing nonstop all day, every day, right? And that they're just generally speaking not doing a lot of syntax by hand anymore. That's a pretty good group of people to target just because they already get it and you don't have to explain why skills are cool and how that's going to up level them. They're already doing it. And now they're sort of getting into those next gen problems where they're like, how do I distribute this to a team of 1,000? How do I, make my
Mm.
cursor users happy as well as my Claude code users happy? Oh, I want a fleet of bots, and agents that are running autonomously. How do I make them smart? The problems get more complex as you sort of get further into that.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. And and obviously like it's more rare to find that kind of expertise considering its early days with AI, but then uh, with like you speaking to people from different organizations, do you find like there's opportunities where you get to kind of walk with them on this journey as they like adopt Sleuth, and you kind of see changes from where they start and maybe a month, 3 months down the line where the progress they've made. Uh, do you see that kind of progress happening quickly? What are some of those milestones that you notice when someone you talk to from the beginning of their journey with AI and with you maybe to maybe a couple of months down the road? What are some of those key milestones and changes that you see, just so that someone who's listening to this who may feel like I'm definitely in a level 1 right now, and so
Mm,
I aspire to be in a level 3, but then how do I get there? How do I know when I'll be there or when I'm making progress towards that? Someone thinking on those lines, what would
yeah.
you say to is that something that you've seen when you've seen organizations go on this journey?
I mean, that's a great question. I'll give an answer, but I will also caveat that answer by saying things are moving so incredibly fast in this space that what I
Mm.
say right now may be completely untrue in the next 2 months. Like
Yeah.
we've never seen anything like this in our industry in terms of speed and pace,
Mhm.
and even just in terms of capabilities of the models, or like things that once didn't work now work. And so I've seen that as well on these orgs that are trying to adopt these things on that journey. Is all of a sudden something that was like very helpful, all of a sudden it just becomes mooted because the models have gotten so much better. But
Mhm.
having thrown that caveat out there, um, I think a lot of one of the milestones is just having some sense of like understanding. So like, you've gotten these tools, who's actually using them, who's not, and coming from a metrics background, I know that like a lot of people have sensitivity towards measurement, but also, too bad. Right? Like, because You have to understand, and if you really want to like make a drastic change inside of your organization, and that's what this is adopting this new tool and working in a new way. I think you need some top down cover, and you need some sort of like dedication and desire to do that. B, you need some sort of standardization. You need to provide everybody with the tools and the space to utilize the tools and the motivations to keep improving the tools, right? And like to bring that back to the Sleuth platform and adoption, when you have codified like a certain set of agent skills, you've sort of blessed them by saying like, we've spent a little time and said like, yes, these are good. This is a good set for this team. And then you have the distribution side of it where you know, you have confidence to know that like, okay, these are now available to each one of the team members, even if it's a 1x team member versus a 10x team member. And then you can start to understand like what kind of engagement are they having with the tools, and you can start to have that conversation where you sort of set goals and you're like, hey guys, I can see based off of the governance side of things that like we only have like 20% adoption. Like that's we've provided these things, we've given you this setup, like we need to get you all along and have you start to use these things. So I think that the milestones are providing people with the information that they need, making sure that they do have best practices, understand how to use it, and then also monitoring and sort of putting in place the things that are going to motivate them to do so. And at some organizations that looks like including AI metrics in performance reviews, or some CTO going out and saying like, I'm going to put a stake in the ground and like we are agentic now, and like here's what that means. Like I am okay with relaxing the pull request review rules, or we're adding this thing as a robot on the pull request, and you must cross this bar, or whatever it is that is comfortable for them to make this radical change inside the org. But that's what I think it looks like. It doesn't. What I have not seen work is the it will just happen organically and everything will be cool, right? Like because
Mm-hmm.
that ends up with this like 10xers and there's 3% of them, and then the rest of the company is behind, and then they sort of go, well, what's next? And you're like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, what is next? You know what I mean? Like this guy has this great setup. How do you communicate that to the rest? Like, and the hard truth of it is that everybody's going to have to work a little bit differently, and that can be very uncomfortable for some people. Some people love it. That's why they got into computer science. And other people are kind of just happy to show up and do the same thing they've been doing all along. And those people need to see the light, you know?
Mm-hmm.
It's like
Wow.
a crappy analogy, which is probably like modern IDEs, right? Like
Okay.
there was a time, and you still get kids using VI and Emacs, and I don't want to start a war, but like I remember back in the day before that those things were available, before there was like an IntelliJ or an Eclipse, if you're old enough, where there were some people that just dragged their feet in terms of using these things, and like they're writing Java boilerplate and this and that whatever, and then they're trying to rename a variable and they're checking in things that break, and you know what I mean, and IDEs just made that go away. Like modern IDEs made that stuff go away, and I think eventually people adopted them. Even VI and Emacs adopted a lot of those features and functionality.
Mm-hmm.
And this is that times 1,000 or whatever, 10,000.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. Interesting analogy there. We've got a lot to talk about in terms
Hmm.
of what you've been building and your approach, and I want to get into that. Let's talk about agent skills to start with. How would you define it, and what does it mean in terms of agent AI workflows?
Yeah. Well, agent skills are deceptively simple and I'd say insanely powerful. I'm still
Mhm.
wrapping my head around like what I think they mean and in the world. And so, I mean, at their very simple core, they're just markdown files, and they can be bundled with some shell scripts. It's like a directory of markdown files, and it starts like there's a little bit of rules. There's like a spec for it that says like you have a front matter, which is like the name and the description. That is all that gets loaded by the harnesses, the coding harnesses. So like they're very small in terms of polluting your context. So you can have like between 30 and 50 of them and not sort of wreck your entire context. And then the LLM is pretty clever about like when you say, I want to write a test and it sees, oh, I've got a skill that says like test writing, right? It will load the first skill.md file, read that into context so you have slightly more context, and then it can reference other things and says, well, if you're going to write a test that's doing, web requests, you should fake it out with this other tool. And that's in this reference file. And then it will like load only that reference file, maybe not the other five that are in that skill. So, that's agent skills. And, I think initially a lot of people thought of them or sold them as repeatable recipes, right? Like I need to generate a PDF. And so in order to do so, step one, I get the content. Step two, I whatever. Step three, I call this Python script that does the thing. Step four, I publish it to whatever, right? But, the internet being the internet, boy, agent skills can do anything and everything. They're really very powerful and interesting. Like some of the best use cases I've seen are when you have like a bespoke code base. Like for instance, we have like a DSL in our product, like that allows you to define metrics. We call it PQL, right? How would an
Mm,
LLM understand how that's structured or what that is meant to do, right? Like it can look at the code every time, but that takes time and it's going to get maybe like 40% of understanding of how that thing hangs together. Or I can build an agent skill that talks all about like when you're extending this DSL, here's how you do it. Here are the extension points. Here's when you would do this. Here's when you would do that, right? And then when I want to work in that area, I load the skill and all of a sudden I have an agent an LLM that has 90% of the knowledge about how this thing works and can do much better job writing things. And super long answer, but I do want to mention this other thing. Gosh, there's this great project on GitHub called Career-Ops or whatever. And for like my kid is younger and is looking for a job and whatever, so it helps with all of that. But the thing that blew my mind is the whole damn thing is written in skills. Like it's just another way of programming. Like that, I was like, oh, I've been doing this for 30 years. Like that's crazy. Like it's very descriptive about first we do this, then we do that, then we do this, then we do that. And it's talking about and you should write this file to disk and it's writing it in this temporary format and then you merge it into this other format and we do these things, but it's really just a series of instructions to the LLM in Markdown, and it's
mm,
programming a whole application. It's remarkable. And like one of the skills is half in English and half in Spanish, because the LLM
mm.
doesn't give a shit about. Sorry, excuse my language, but it doesn't care at all about what human language you're speaking in. It's crazy.
Yeah, yeah, amazing. What's the name again of this GitHub project?
Oh, career ops.
Korea. Okay. All right. I'll check it
Yeah.
out. Wow.
Yeah. I've been
So
telling everybody I know about it because I'm just like that. I mean, I've used skills. I think we're pretty deep in skills and, like I feel like but that was like taking it to the nth degree where I'm like an entire application basically just written in skills. I'm like, this is the future.
wow. Should check it out. So agent skills, is this something that it's just within Claude, or is this like are there other providers as well that provide this and call it the same thing? So is this just a Claude thing, agent skills?
No, not at all. I mean, it was. It's like MCP. So like Anthropic is
Okay.
two for two in the sense that like they put out the spec and they put out the implementation. And like we were fortunate that we were in the vicinity and we'd kind of been looking around this stuff anyway. So like on day one of Agent Skills, we were like, that's another MCP moment. Like this is happening, right? And it was incredible to watch how all of the major providers just very quickly had a skills implementation. And I mean, the stupid thing, or maybe the positive thing for us, because it's one of the things that we do, is that like they have not agreed upon the a common directory. So like Claude puts it in a .claude directory, and Cursor puts it in a different one, and they all treat it a little differently. But generally speaking, I'd say most of the what we're calling AI assets, for lack of a better word, uh, are common across most of the popular harnesses. So you get like rules, which are like a broken down version of like your main agents file. You do have like something like either an agents.md or a claude.md. You get hooks,
Mhm.
which are like, post-event triggers. You get MCPs, you get skills, and what am I forgetting? I'm forgetting agents. Oh, agents themselves.
Mhm. Tell us a bit about what's possible with them. How do you see organizations using them across the software delivery process? What's possible? Give us a glimpse.
Oh gosh, I like this term, the everything application, because I kind of feel like that's what these things are becoming.
Okay.
And I mean, anything and everything is kind of possible. And it's so interesting, like with a mix of skills and MCPs, you can do incredible things. Here's a great example, or here's an example. I don't know if it's a great example. I had an issue that was only showing up in production. Turns out we had shipped something that had killed some background workers, and it wasn't entirely obvious as to why. But locally, having a skill that talked about like how we do our production logging, how we do our production, how we are set up in AWS, and how our application is structured. And then having the MCPs connected to those things, I was able to say, hey, I'm seeing this issue in prod, but I think it might be this, I think it might be that. And it was like, oh, I found a bug in the Python code. And I'm like, okay, but I don't think that's all of it. And, I turned around and was like, let me open up Datadog. Like maybe I can just start to like use this query thing for logs to see if it, whatever. And then the LLM was like, nah, 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 I loaded this skill. Like I'm going to go query Datadog. And it's like, you know what? You're right.
Wow.
I haven't seen these things running for the last 3 days. Let me look further back. Oh yeah, no, it should be blah, 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 blah. Let me use my Git skills to see, oh yeah, there was this big change here and whatever that you did and yada yada yada. And then what else? It reached out to a third. Oh, I think I had given it read access to AWS, and it was like, you know what? I can also see that like this thing, the memory pressure on here, whatever this and that. I figured it out, right? It was like, yes, you made this change. It's like, and it did like a an amazing thing where it like checked our celery queue, and it was like, oh gosh, like the queue is overloaded. It's exploding. And I was like, well, why wasn't there a monitor? Oh, I see the monitor in Datadog, and that was disabled like a few weeks ago for some reason. Blah, blah, blah. Right. Like the everything
Wow.
application. I'm like, I have a problem. And it was like, I have the tools to help you solve your problem. And it was a mix of skills so that it knew how it all hangs together and where to look. And then the data connectors to go off and do it. And, something that would have taken me a full day of investigation and slowly plodding through the logs and convincing myself that that thing was off. 20 minutes later, I'm like, got it.
Man, that's amazing. That's an
Right.
amazing example there, and something that you experienced yourself. Yeah. That's a lot of access though. And I mean, just a few months ago, I would say, I mean, maybe even now, for a lot of people hearing that a bot can have that much access to your system would make them, I don't know, spooked out a bit. It doesn't seem good security practice coming from like the traditional security approaches. Uh, how do you think about that, the other side of this, giving so much access to a bot?
I mean, it's a concern to be sure, but I mean, the nice thing is that a lot of it is using scoping rules that we've already sort of agreed upon. So like I say, like read only AWS access. I'm like, worst comes to worst, it's gonna what like maybe read a secret and that it shouldn't or something. Like read only log access. Again, I'm like, I'm okay with that. You know what I mean? Like, and I think the mental shift I don't believe that I would have given that task or those tools to a fully autonomous agent, right? But
Hmm.
an agent that is my buddy and we're working together, different story, right? Like I'm sitting there watching it. I've given it like hard instructions, like if you are going to try and do something that requires write access, like number one, you can't. Number two, ask me. Like we'll work around it. I will execute that for you. Explain it to me quite heavily, and so I mean, it's definitely a real thing. And I mean, that's a lot of why we're building what we're building as well is like this governance side of things where like I think it's about trusting and verifying, right? Like you just need to have an audit log to know, like, oh my God, it tried to do that thing. Like that MCP is far too broad. Uh, and I probably jumping the gun, but I mean that brings us to this idea of shadow AI. And I think
Mm.
that's the concern in the industry right now too, is that like some developers hooked up all the things, right? And they're not being careful and they're like letting it go off and do its own thing. And it's, writing to something that really should be locked down, and that's terrifying and nobody in the organization knows.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and that you mentioned you wouldn't give access like that to an autonomous agent, but there's as well on the rise. There's autonomous coding agents that
Yeah.
organizations are starting to use. Talk to us about just that move, how that's happening, where it's at, and even just some of the things that Sleuth is doing related to that.
Yeah. I mean, that is boy, that's here and it's here to stay. I think there's opportunity. I mean, you talked to Ramiro at Octeto, and I know that they're
Mhm.
looking in that area. And I think there's a wonderful overlap between what they're doing and what we're doing. In fact, Ramiro
Mhm.
and I are going to like have a hackathon next week where we try and
Oh,
like see if we can't combine the two and solve some of this. But almost every organization that I've spoken to that's in that phase three, that's their top of mind issue right now. So either they have hacked something together and it's running, or they are hacking something together so that it can be running, but it's a capability that their users are demanding. They want to be able to go into Slack and say fix JRA 123. Then they want to look at the pull request, leave a comment on the pull request that says try it different, do it this way, and then look at it and say cool, done, I'm shipping it. Obviously, not every kind of problem can be handled by that. It is interesting because we looked at one shots maybe a year ago when we first started playing with a lot of these tools in earnest, and it seemed like it was an improbability. You know what I mean? You're like, this thing makes such dumb mistakes that like there's no world where you can one shot this. But it's gotten so very good at solving a lot of things, like even complex things. And then again, the unlock are these agent skills, right? Like you give a vanilla LLM a task and it will go off and do its research and it'll do pretty good. I mean, in this day and age, they've gotten very, very good, but you give it a task with these skills for your organization and you can get it dialed. You know what I mean? Like you can feel pretty confident that it's worked in your coding standards. It has, structured the code in the right way. It, like understands some of the gotchas that you have in your code base. And so anyway, a lot of organizations are trying to figure out how to do that and how to get those autonomous coding agents to produce code internally.
mhm. I want to segue into talking about just Sleuth's approach to just governing, helping organizations govern all of these agents, because obviously the potential is huge, but it comes with, having to like, your tagline says, agents are only as good as the amount of access they have.
Yeah.
Uh, and Sleuth helps with that. So give us the elevator pitch and kind of explain Sleuth's approach to just helping organizations govern how agents function.
Yeah. Well, I think I have to just before I jump too hard into that, maybe talk
Mhm.
slightly about like the mechanisms that like the tool providers have given us for distribution. So
Okay.
we covered a little bit on like if you're using Cursor and you're using Claude, right? And you have encapsulated a bunch of knowledge in the place that Claude wants it to be. That doesn't automatically translate into where Cursor wants it to be. Like for the most part, it's one to one. Like, but obviously an organization doesn't want to keep two versions of all their stuff laying around. They don't want to have to like tell everybody to symlink these directories when
Mm.
you're working like this or working like that. And,
Yeah.
so I think thing number one is portability. Like you want
Mhm.
to have your knowledge encoded in one way and say, these are our tools in one way, in one place. And you want that to
Mhm.
work everywhere that you're trying
Yeah.
to use these tools. Like even if you're using it in Claude.ai, like the cloud-based version, you're right. You're like, I gave you smarts. I want you to be smart. And then thing number two is the distribution mechanism for skills are basically you check them into Git, right? So you check it into a code repository. You can also distribute them via like Claude Code plugins, which is like a marketplace and plugin thing. But again, it's in Git. And what you don't get with that is you don't understand like what's being used. You don't, you know what I mean? Like if you have 30 skills and 29 of them are garbage, but one of them is good, you don't know that, right? You also don't get like a way to share across, like to say like, hey, my entire team should have this set of skills. You don't necessarily have RBAC on top of that either. So like if you are in a large enough organization, let's say you have somebody that is like your kind of gatekeeper to say like, look, I am the arbiter of like what our coding standards are. You don't have the ability to say, hey, junior guy who just started a week ago who thought he's going to completely change our coding standards, you shouldn't be able
Mhm.
to check that in. And then all of a sudden, all of us get that, and now like we have like 3 days of weird code because we didn't understand that you made that change, right? So RBAC that says like, hey, here's some of the rationale around like why you can or can't, publish different changes to skills. And then obviously
Mhm.
just the insight into who's using who's downloading what clients are doing what. Like are the bots using more than the humans? Are the humans using more than the bots? Like what is our adoption rate? Like not self-reported, but realistically through code, who's actually accessed these things. And so that's a lot of our thesis with the Sleuth product is to say the distribution mechanism that was given to us, it's not bad and it can work in smaller teams, but when you really want to start to do it at scale, give it to bots, like what we were just talking about, like don't give those MCPs to the bots, give it to the humans, right? Like how do you do that, right? Like you can definitely hack it all together yourself, or you could have a platform that is going to make that all a lot easier.
Mhm. Wow. Yeah, definitely a good way you broke that down there. Just the need for a source of truth for context and how do you distribute those agent skills. So yeah, quite important. So yeah, that said, what's Sleuth's approach and what are some of the design decisions you made to enable this?
Hmm. So, I mean, thing number one, I'd say is just let's structure things the way that teams are structured out in the wild, right? So you have like an organization, you have teams. Teams are made up of people. Sometimes those teams like own or don't own repositories, right? Repositories exist out in the wild, and then there's just individuals, right? So like let's recognize that that's the structure of existing organizations and let
Mhm.
you install these things at those different levels, right? And I guess the other thing too would be like bots, right? Like, because that's a real thing now too, to say like there's a difference between a human and a bot, and they might
Yeah.
have different permission levels. You might have a fleet. You're like, I have 2,000 instances of that bot. So like I do want to roll out one change to them and have all 2,000 of them get it. So
Mhm.
I'd say that's like design decision number one is like even though AI is new and everything has changed, the structure of how we structure organizations has not, right?
Right.
Thing number two is define once, roll anywhere, right? Like that's just like, we have not invented any wheels with that. That is why we have code reuse. That is like, there's a million instances of why that is true. And even if the LLMs get exceptionally good, I still think there's things that like, you're going to tell it this is how we do our gap reporting if I'm a finance person, right? Like it's
Mhm.
always a little different. Yes, there's like gap, and that's how like gap is defined, but like what are you doing with gap, right? So like knowledge is important, giving the LLMs knowledge is important, but also I want to use it anywhere and everywhere I want, right? Like humans don't necessarily pick the one thing. So like they're going to use the Claude.ai or they're going to use Claude Code or they're going to use Cowork or they're going to use Codex or they're going to use Kiro, right? And that needs to be portable and easy. And I guess that leads me to the third thing, which is ease, right? Like, and we've seen this. The good news is we've seen this in the software world over and over and over again, right? Distribution is a pain in the butt. So, like in a
Mhm.
large organization, when you define something and you want to get it out to 1,000 people, you can have a wiki page that says do these 15 steps, right? But A, the wiki page gets out of date very quickly. B, you miss step 13 and 17 or whatever, uh, and you have no way of knowing has somebody done that. You're like, oh, well, the reason it's not working for is because you haven't done any of these things, right? So, how do we do that? Like, with provisioning, you give somebody a laptop, you put on an MDM agent, and like, boof, they get all the software. Same sort of thing here, right? Like, define all your stuff, run this one command, and then forever moving forward, it's just up to date, and you get your best practices, and the agents are smart.
Yeah, a really interesting approach there. And yeah, I was thinking it's a good time to dive into the demo and see
Oh,
what
sure.
Sleuth looks like and some of these ideas in practice. Especially, I'm curious to see just how you've implemented this define once role everywhere, because that seems quite interesting to me.
Yeah. Let me share my screen. And here we go. Okay. Can you see that?
Yep.
Okay, great. So what we're looking at right now is Sleuth skills, and I'm looking at like the install screen. So you can see that like for me and in this repository that we call Pulse, this is the full context of all the different AI assets that I will have installed, right? And you can actually see that I have them installed. So like I am up to date. And some of these are personal assets. So again, like what we were talking about before, like the structure of our organization, like, I was working on a thing that would allow us to control this entire application via an MCP or Claude code. So like that's something that I wanted for me. I didn't want to give to the whole team just yet. There's a bunch of stuff that is in the repository, like, or that is at the repository level that makes sense for Pulse itself. And some of these are rules and some of these are skills. Some of these are MCPs. There's some stuff that is at the team level, where we're like, oh yeah, we have multiple projects that use GraphQL. So this is how we use GraphQL, right? Or I don't know if this was on the podcast or not, but we use Linear as an issue tracker. Like, so here's an MCP for everybody that like will give them access to Linear that is in this team. And then we have like organizational skills that are like not necessarily related to coding, right? It's how to create pull requests, how to analyze a Reddit post. Like we use Granola for conversation recordings. So like an MCP that's going to give you access to that information. How to do a LinkedIn company post, or yeah, a skill creator or those sorts of things. So, this is the gambit of like what I will get when I am local. If I were to say like clear out that repository, you can see like, yeah, I'm still going to get these things. I'm going to get my personal ones and I'm going to get the ones that are at the organizational level, but it's a far less than what I would have had in the other instance. So
Hmm.
what we're seeing here, and maybe I should do this first, is um, like this is a skill. I can see these are the skill things that I was talking about. Here's the front matter. Like this is the skill file. I can see that there's been a lot of versions, like I want to see like, what's changed and like, what are we doing in these different things here. The nice thing about LLMs is they do give us a lot of power. So like we can see if this is a good skill or not, right? Like we automatically generate these evals, which tell the LLM how it should or shouldn't use the skill. It runs a bunch of benchmarks, which will sort of run it without and run it with. And then like the delta is kind of, like why this skill is useful. We also have a way of like judging quality based off of like the spec and like, the way that you want to be looking at these things. And then there's like obviously like the governance side of things where, you might want to see like, okay, who's downloading this? How was it done? Like, oh, okay, like the bot was downloading this thing, and I can like jump over there and see like all the things that are related to this asset, and who's doing what and what's happening. Um,
Hmm.
yeah, that's a pretty big whirlwind of a thing.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. How,
the
how do
from
you
the
control
governance side,
access?
like, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, yeah. I was just wondering, like, how do you control access to these skills, and especially as you were mentioning, distribution of the skills. Really curious to see that part.
Yeah, so from like I can define a team. That team has certain members. From there, I can basically make somebody an admin, or I can like make them like a generalized admin. And
Mm,
so like once I've kind of set up the RBAC side of things, like if I am not an admin and I try and edit a skill, it's going to create like a skill pull request, and then send a notification to one of the admins, and then I can kind of come in here and say like, oh, okay, well, somebody wants to make this change. I can either approve it or I can reject it. It's the same with like if you're using the LLM to adjust, one of the assets. So basically, it says like, let's let you set up the structure. Obviously, by default, everybody can do whatever they want. But if you want to impose some sort of control, like that's how you would go about doing it.
got it. Okay, okay. Yeah. Oh,
Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
didn't really get too involved in this, but one thing that is actually great that we use all the time is having the
Mhm.
LLM do most of it. So if you were to look at this one, I think my original prompt, oh, actually, that was quite large. Let me find a different one. That did not have a very detailed prompt. But if I wanted to, let's see. Da, 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 da. Oh, you know what? I know which one is orchestrators. So I came in here and I basically created this using the LLM, right? So I just said this. I said, hey, create a skill, describes how we do this thing. We do this in the code, but we should use it in these ways. And then what happens is the LLM goes off and we're connected to GitHub and it looks for related code. It finds all the things. It comes back. It makes some queries. It decides like, oh, I think this is pretty good. And then
Mhm.
like it created the skill, and I can come back and say, hey, actually, it looks like you missed this part. Like we need to do this, and then, oh, okay, let me adjust that. Let me update the thing. Or like, okay, now do this, blah blah blah, right? And it will help create all these different versions that we have and improve the skill. And it makes basically you saying, oh gosh, there's that bespoke area of thing, we should probably have a skill around that, and then it can go off and create it. And you know uh it gets you to the 80% of creating these things like really easily and really quickly. uh
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh, yeah. Where would you say someone would get started, like someone who's just getting started with agent skills? Where would you say are the most likely places they should look to start with?
um well, there's a
What
few
kind?
different things you could do. You could there's a lot of catalogs out there. There's like skills.sh and Smithery, and like they are like public catalogs, right? So you can come in here, and if you're like, oh, I'm concerned about Vue, like, well, okay, what are the Vue best practices? Cool. Okay, maybe I'll try that skill.
Wow.
You can try something from like a public catalog, or if you have some bespoke things, you can come in and let's see, if I wanted to, you can get skill suggestions, right? We can go in and we can analyze your repository, and we're like, hey, I think you have an asset vault system. You should probably have a skill around that, and then you can just turn that into a skill. It's like that's another way to just start. Or if you already have some skills, then like they just kind of load in, and off you go.
Hmm. Hmm. All right. All right. Yeah, that's quite powerful. We're almost out of time, but there's a really fascinating demo, and just I think quite amazed at just the potential and just how fast things are moving. But I'm also quite intrigued because I think that what Sleuth is and what you're building is quite indispensable when you go this route of working with agent skills and at such scale and with so much of like permission, so much at stake. You absolutely need something like this, or there's just no way to humanly keep track of all of this and do this all manually. And so I think in that sense, what you're building is kind of like table stakes for anyone who wants to play at this level and really do, agentic AI. They can't do without something like this. So quite important what you're building. Do you get that sense as well when you speak to prospects and customers?
I do. But it is interesting. Like it's almost like like the hierarchy of needs.
Hmm.
Which is this. I think the maturity around this comes a little bit later because, like, in the hierarchy of needs, even at large organizations, and this has really surprised me, is like they just want to get it out there. Like we just need to get some stuff working. So it's fine to start in Git. It's fine to start without any governance. You're like, I said something to somebody at Airbnb the other day where I'm like, okay, well, they have something. They're in the middle of provisioning these like independent agents, and the guy was like, yeah, we have a fleet of 2,000 servers that are going to be like running all these bots and agentic code things for this. And I was like, what if somebody checked in a shitty version of your coding standards, and then like you only pick that up like 3 days later, and you have 2,000 servers that are off running these agents producing code that is now not Airbnb quality code. And his reaction was, oh, I'd love it if that happened. He's like, because like I want people to know that AI can be dangerous and that like like we have to take these things seriously or whatever. And I'm like, that's so weird. I'm like, you can anticipate that problem. Like, why wouldn't you want to like sort it out now? So it's again the hierarchy of needs is getting that system in place so that they have 2,000 agents that are going nuts, right? And then I think like next is like when it screws up, they're like, okay, now let's solve that. You know?
Oh yeah, wait till that happens, and I think then he'll probably change his mind.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
very quickly, right? Yeah.
Uh, but I think you're really quite being a trailblazer here in the sense of just the pace at which you're innovating and kind of anticipating needs and
Mm,
building for it even before the general market senses it. But I think it's coming really soon, and with the pace that things are going, I think pretty soon people are going to realize that the talk is going to move from we've gotten started, but now we've done all this stuff that we built it wrong, and how do we do it the right way now? And I think, there's just going to be a natural trend to look for something like Sleuth.
yeah.
Uh, what do you see happening in the next 12 months or so? And I know the space changes so fast, but what's interesting as you like read out there? What interests you about the possibilities?
Oh man, I knew you were going to ask this question, and it was terrifying me because of the fact that I feel like none of us can see more than 3 months in advance right now. I used to have a pretty good crystal ball, but it's really foggy and pretty opaque at this point. It's
I can change my question and make it like, what do you see happening in the next month?
seriously, seriously. I mean, like, I'm super curious to understand like what when Anthropic gets their shit together and can have enough compute for Mythos and they give that to all of us, if it's really 10 to 15 or 20% better than what we have right now, this idea of one shot agentic is, I mean, it's already a reality, right? Like, and in that world, it's just going to be so radically different. Um, yeah, it's hard to say. I mean, the interesting thing is too is that there are a lot of laggards, right? So like I'd say the majority of us out in industry are probably going to get to where a lot of some people are today, in the next
Mhm.
year. So they're going to be like, slow to adopt and to be like, hey, now we've now we're actually using the agents to do some code, and the other people, the people that are doing that now, are going to be like, yeah, we are so far beyond you. You know what I mean? Like we've gotten rid of pull requests, or we've gotten rid of whatever. I don't know what the future holds. Like I can say that that is an area that is ripe for disruption, and I wish that I had a great idea about how to disrupt that, because when you have all this volume, right? We have yet to figure out how to vet it with humans and give it
Mhm.
the a-okay, like, because at the end of the day, we still want a human to be responsible for that stuff and that change. But at the pace that LLMs are able to generate this stuff, we can't keep up. So something there has to change pretty radically. And so I
Yeah.
guess if you were asking me my crystal ball prediction in a year or a year and a half, some 23-year-old kid has a great idea about how to do that, and they're going to make a lot of money when they get it out to the rest of us. And I kind of see GitHub pull requests, or either they're going to enhance it or they're going to go away or something. I don't really know what that looks like. I wish to God I did. Because again, I'd like to be that 23-year-old kid figuring that thing out. You
Wow.
know,
Yeah, hard to think of pull requests going away completely, but that it's even a possibility.
they can't
Yeah.
work when you have if
Yeah.
you Airbnb or no, what was it? Stripe put out a blog, and I don't know if this is hyperbole or what, but they said they're
Mhm.
shipping 1,000 pull requests a week from one-shotted like agentic workers. Who in God's name, as a human, can review 1,000 pull requests a week plus the stuff that we're doing? It's just not
Wow.
possible.
Yeah. Yeah. Amazing. Yeah, and I think, I think your attitude as well is quite contagious just listening to you because it feels like, you're in this and you're kind of, playing with all of these AI tools. Just it's kind of like a little kid with crayons, it's messy, it's
Yeah,
uh but it's exciting and it's fun
it
and
is.
comes through when you speak. And I
Oh, that's
think
great.
yeah, yeah, it was really a fascinating conversation, and I think you really dove in deep about just what's happening, what you see, where we're really at, and where we're headed. Really got a good look at what's happening with agentic AI.
Can I
Thanks so much.
mention one thing before we sign off? I forgot to say this. If anybody's interested in what we've been talking about and they want to start quick and easy, we built an open source project. It's called SX on GitHub, and it does a lot of what I showed in the Sleuth product,
Is
but
that
at
like
sort of like the open source side of it. So
is that like the letters S and X or
yes,
ES and
S and X. Yeah. So it's under
okay,
sleuth/SX. And,
okay.
it has a Git backing instead of like a SaaS backing, but it allows you
Mhm.
to do some of the usage tracking and team stuff. So if you want to dip your toe, that's where I would suggest people start. So yeah, sorry to stop your flow,
All
but I
right, all
figured
right.
I should get
Yeah,
that out
no,
there.
cool. Yeah, that's a great takeaway from this. Yeah, so thanks so much, Dylan, for tuning in, and we'll get you back soon, maybe
Great.
later this year, early next year, because so much is going to happen that I'm sure you're going to have lots to talk about.
Yeah.
But really enjoyed this conversation with you.
Same. Yeah. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Yeah, and thanks to all of our listeners and viewers for tuning in. We hope you enjoyed this conversation and it piqued your interest in AI. Hope you go build something good and hope you get to that point where you need to use something like Sleuth to really get a handle of all that's happening. Because from all that Dylan says, things are moving at breakneck speed, and nobody wants to be left behind. But exciting times. Join us on the next conversation as we keep unpacking all that AI, agentic AI means today. Thanks for tuning into this episode. See you on the next one.